Is there room for jealousy and insecurity in a relationship? Is there a healthy amount of jealousy that people should have in a relationship? Or does jealousy and insecurity only cause more suffering and pain in a relationship?
Well, I think there's a reasonable amount of proprietary interest, let's say. I mean, in a classic monogamous relationship, a marriage, there's sexual fidelity as a crucial element of that. And maybe you'll make an arrangement that differs from that, but it's not easy to chart uncharted territory like that. I mean, if you want to have an adventure like that with a partner, a monogamous adventure that also includes sexual exploration, well, maybe you can pull it off, but I doubt it. It's really complicated.
Yeah. Let's say you're not having sexual exploration with other people and you're telling each other the truth and you're being honest. Is there room to be jealous or insecure in that relationship? Or does jealousy typically cause more harm than it does, spice and good, I guess?
I think jealousy probably causes more trouble than good, but that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the proprietary interest. Mm-hmm. Should you care if your partner pays undue attention to someone of the opposite sex they find attractive? Well, probably you should care. You might even say something about it. They might even be happy about that, right? Because it indicates that you noticed and that it matters to you. Now, I think it shades into jealousy when it's harmless interactions. It's interactions that would be regarded as harmless by a third-party observer, let's say. I know that's a very difficult line to draw, that are being magnified as a consequence of insecurity on the part of the observer. Or there's envy where your partner is attracting attention, status, success, any of those things, and you're jealous of that. That's not helpful. You should be pleased. The optimal situation is for you to be pleased when your partner is successful. I don't think competitive couples, I don't think competition between people who are in a monogamous relationship is useful, particularly. It's not zero-sum competition.
Yeah.
I mean, you can compete in a game-like sense.
Right. Fun, fun, playful competition, but not.
Yeah, but not existential competition. You're on the same team. That's the point.
Right.
And if one of you is feeling left behind for one reason or another, it's time to throw that out on the table and say, look, I'm playing second fiddle here far too often. What can we do about that? Well, it looks like you need it. And like I've got an adventure, it looks like you need one too. Well, how can we rearrange the situation so I have my adventure? And then it's up to that person too to figure out what obstacles they might be putting up in their own pathway, right? That's stopping them. And then they have, they're angry at you for getting in the way, but it's actually a consequence of them using you as a convenient excuse for not doing something difficult. Those things all have to be sorted through. It's very hard.
Yeah.
These conversations are extremely difficult. It's no wonder people avoid them. I also think people are not taught to negotiate.
Oh man.
At all. And that's a real shame. First of all, you figure out what you want. This is what I want. Then you tell the person, then you strategize with them so that you can get what you want and they can get what they want. And you both know what that is and away you go together. And that usually comes out. It's usually obscured and hidden and comes out awkwardly and difficulty and with difficulty if it comes out at all. And people fool themselves into thinking that it's okay what they're doing. I'm sacrificing myself for the children and that's okay. I'm sacrificing myself for my husband's career and that's okay. I'm working at a job I can't stand because I need to support my wife and children and that's okay. I mean, sometimes that is okay, but it has to be out clear in the open, talked about, negotiated, discussed. I think you can be a slave or a tyrant or you can negotiate. Those are your options.
Mm-hmm.
And we default to slavery and tyranny because that doesn't require any cognitive effort. And then we pretend that everything's all right. And then it blows up in our faces and we end up divorced.
Right. So we got to learn how to negotiate. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and then you have to notice that there are things that you want, right? And you have to tell yourself what those are. And then you have to let the other person know. And then they can deprive you of them because they actually know who you are. And so that's a big risk.
Mm.
But if you do lay it out and negotiate it, then you have two people working in the same direction, and they each bring their different viewpoints to bear on the problem. And sometimes that'll save you, that additional cognitive complexity you have because there's two of you instead of one. Mm-hmm. It can make you much more effective.
What happens when we feel like our partner is depriving us of what we want? If it's not, infidelity or something of the likes of being with other people, but something else that we want in our life, a goal.
Well, sexually, that happens all the time.
Right.
Because people, generally speaking, men would like to have sex more frequently than women. So that's a sticking point in many relationships. But forget that for the moment. We might just as well say that the probability that one partner and the other partner are going to have exactly the same level of sexual interest, say with regards to frequency, is quite low. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be friction there. So what do? Well, you negotiate about it. It's like, well, I'd like to have sex 15 times a week. Well, I'd like to have sex once a week.
Right.
Okay, well, the logical meeting point there would be in the middle. Mm-hmm. But then that has to be planned out. And you also have to say exactly what you mean. Well, exactly what do you mean by sex? Because there's all sorts of variations of sex, ranging from just intimate closeness to mm-hmm. full-fledged sexual activity of various sorts. And the various sorts matter too. And these are painful discussions often. It's very funny in some sense that people will do and desire things that they won't talk about. Right? They'll engage in the act, but they won't engage in the negotiation. And they won't admit what they want.
Why is it so hard for us to admit what we want?
We're ashamed of it. That's easy with sex. Sex and shame regulates sex. People say, well, you shouldn't be ashamed of sex. It's like, well, really? Really? No, that's a stupid theory. We arrest people who expose themselves in public. Why? Well, because we don't want people masturbating in public. We assume they should be ashamed enough not to do that. Mm-hmm. Shame regulates sexual behavior. So we're embarrassed about our desires. And, naively, you'd think, well, you can just shed that. Well, first of all, no, you can't. And second of all, it isn't obvious at all that you should. What you might be able to do is to determine how to play out your sexual life in the confines of your relationship in a manner that neither of you do find shameful. But that's just think how hard that is. Like, you think, well, that's what I want. It's like, but then you think about how unlikely that is and how difficult it would be to attain it. You could say that if that ever happens to you in your life once, you're lucky, that it's perfect. Now, I think that's pessimistic because I believe that solutions to that problem can be negotiated, but it's not. It's what everyone wants, but it's an extraordinarily difficult thing to bring about. So let's say you want the ideal romantic evening. Well, okay, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to put yourself in reasonable physical shape? So you're attractive? Mm-hmm. Are you going to make a playlist and put some time into it? Are you going to buy some candles? Are you going to buy something nice to wear? Are you going to wear it? Are you going to dare to wear it? That might be true for you and for your partner. Are they going to dare to wear it? Are you going to be smart enough if they do wear it to respond in a way that makes them feel confident and increases the probability that they'll do it again? Are you going to do whatever is necessary to make yourself physically attractive in that moment? Are you going to have the kids put away? Have you got the day-to-day aggravations with each other that are dragging you down and making you resentful under control so that you actually do want to give your partner some pleasure? Like, these things are very hard, but they're not impossible. They're worth it. But it's not surprising that people don't do it. And then the next, then there's the shame part too, as well. Okay, just exactly what is permissible or desirable, and when are your kinks counterproductive? Exactly. We certainly can't have that discussion as a culture. On the one hand, we think, we're so split on this. On the one hand, we think any sexual misbehavior should be subject to the harshest of punishments, and everything goes and is acceptable. It's like, well, good luck having both of those ideas.
Right.
It's so interesting to me to watch this. There's just outrage, constant outrage about sexual misbehavior. And fair enough. Like, that doesn't surprise me.
When you mean sexual misbehavior, you mean someone cheating or someone having an affair, or what sexual misbehavior?
Yes, or unwanted sexual attention or sexual harassment. And I'm not saying these things don't happen or that they're not nefarious and awful. Obviously they are. It's no wonder that happens. But at the same time, we also are obsessed with the notion that any sexual interest of any sort whatsoever, with the possible exception of sexual interest in children, is absolutely laudable. Well, sorry, you can't have both of those things.
Right.
So, and because we want both of them, insist upon both of them, then we can't even have a discussion. We can't have a discussion about pornography. It doesn't look to me like pornography is really a very good idea. I don't think it's helping anyone. Now, there might be codicils to that, freedom of expression, some potential educational utility, the pleasure that's a consequence of sexual utilization of pornographic material. But I would still say, seeing all that it's not a net social good. It doesn't do the people who produce it or who consume it any good. And I don't believe that anyone feels like a better human being after utilizing pornography for sexual gratification. Now, you might say, well, that's because they've been shamed about sex since they're born, and and that's a consequence of our crooked culture. And in a utopian world, we wouldn't have that shame. And no. It's way more complicated than that. And I read something in one of the YouTube comments in my video the other day. I was talking to Abigail Schreier about the apparent fact that today's teenagers are having much less sex. One person commented that there's the shame that men feel when sex is a spectator sport rather than a participatory act. And then you think, well, the mere fact that you're watching two other people, one of whom isn't you, having sex instead of having sex, really implies something either about it implies something about your desirability. It's pretty hard to shake that, isn't it? Or your courage. Why is it that you're sitting there alone at night with your laptop on your lap? What the hell's wrong with you? Well, nothing. It's just we should dispense with sexual shame. It's like, no, probably not. That's probably not the answer.